I will never forget that evening when it all began. We were sitting at the table in my mother-in-law's house, a huge mansion in the Hamptons, which she loved to show off at every opportunity. The whole family had gathered to discuss the upcoming wedding of Christina, my husband Andrew's sister. The wedding promised to be grand, a country club venue for 300 people, live band, a celebrity wedding planner. My mother-in-law, Victoria Patterson, had been occupied with preparations for several months already, as if she were marrying off her only daughter to royalty. I silently listened as they discussed the guest list, seating arrangements, and menu. No one was interested in my opinion. I was just the wife of the younger son, a girl from a small town whom Andrew had brought to New York 5 years ago. Victoria Patterson never forgot this and made me feel it at every opportunity. "Can you believe it? Only 3 weeks left!" exclaimed Christina, flipping through her planner. "Mom, did you definitely finalize the guest list with everyone?" "Of course, darling." My mother-in-law bestowed a warm smile on her daughter, one that I never received. "All our friends, Richard's business partners, your sorority sisters. I think the cream of New York society will be there." I felt Andrew tense up beside me. He knew what was coming next. And indeed, my mother-in-law slowly turned to me, and in her eyes I saw that familiar, mocking gleam. "And you, Aaron, who are you planning to invite?" she asked with feigned concern. "After all, you also have the right to invite your relatives to your sister-in-law's wedding." I knew this game. Victoria Patterson understood perfectly well that I had no one in New York. My father died 10 years ago. Only my mother remained, living in our small town in upstate New York. My mother-in-law contemptuously called this town the middle of nowhere, although more than 15,000 people lived there. "Thank you, Victoria, but I don't think it's necessary," I answered in the most neutral tone possible. "How can that be?" My mother-in-law threw up her hands, feigning surprise. "We're one family. Of course, your mother should be at the wedding. Right, Christina?" Christina shrugged non-committally. She didn't feel particular animosity toward me like her mother did, but she didn't consider it necessary to defend me either. To her, I was simply part of the furniture, her brother's wife who cooked, cleaned, and didn't make waves. "Aaron's mom lives far away," Andrew tried to intervene. "It'll be difficult for her to get here." "Nonsense!" Victoria Patterson waved it off. "There are planes, trains, buses." She paused, then added with a sly smile, "Although, of course, for someone from a small town, even the trip to New York is quite an adventure." I clenched my fists under the table. Every word from my mother-in-law was soaked with poison, but I had learned not to react. Any reaction from me only encouraged her, gave her reason for new mockery. "You know what, Aaron?" continued Victoria, leaning back in her chair. "Be sure to call your mother, invite her officially. We'll be only too happy to see her. What's it called? What town are you from?" "Watertown," I answered quietly. "Oh, yes, Watertown." She pronounced the name as if it were something distasteful. "Upstate. How quaint. Anyway, invite your mom. Let her see how weddings are done in the city. Everything's probably much simpler where you're from, right?" "Mom, that's enough," Andrew muttered discontentedly. "What's enough?" Victoria feigned sincere bewilderment. "I'm speaking from a pure heart. I want Aaron's mom to share this celebration with us too. Right, dear?" She turned to me. "Call your people, let Mama come. Just—" She paused significantly. "Just make sure she prepares appropriately. You know, everything will be very upscale here. Distinguished guests." "Mom," Andrew cut her off sharply. "What?" My mother-in-law innocently opened her eyes wide. "Did I say something wrong? I just want everyone to feel comfortable. Aaron's mom, too." She paused and added, not looking at me, "Most importantly, make sure she dresses properly. After all, in those small towns, people probably don't have much occasion for formal wear. I'd hate for her to feel out of place." Silence hung in the air. Even Christina raised her eyebrows. clearly understanding that her mother had crossed a line. I sat unable to move, feeling heat flooding my face. It was so humiliating, so cruel, that I simply couldn't find anything to say in response. "Stop it immediately." Andrew exploded, standing up from the table. "Why are you getting all worked up?" Victoria said with a smirk, "I'm joking. Isn't it obvious? Of course, we'd love to have Aaron's mom." The last words she pronounced in such a tone that it became clear this wasn't a joke, but mockery in its purest form. She didn't even expect that Mom would actually come. It was just another way to humiliate me, to show my place in this family. That evening, Andrew and I left in silence. All the way home he apologized, said that his mother was going too far, that he would talk to her. But I knew that nothing would change. In 5 years, Andrew had never truly been able to stand up to his mother. He was a good person, he loved me, but in front of Victoria Patterson, he turned into an obedient boy. Coming home, I couldn't fall asleep for a long time. My mother-in-law's words echoed in my head again and again. Make sure she dresses properly. It was so offensive, so unfair. My mother is a mathematics teacher who has worked in public schools all her life, a woman with a master's degree, an excellent homemaker. She has a nice house with all modern amenities. My mother-in-law knew this, but she didn't care. To her, my mother and I would forever remain small-town people, second-class citizens. The next day, I thought for a long time about calling my mom. On one hand, I didn't want her to know about this humiliation. On the other hand, I needed to somehow explain why I wasn't inviting her to Christina's wedding. Mom would definitely ask. In the end, that evening I dialed her number. "Hi, Mom," I began, trying to make my voice sound cheerful. "Aaron, sweetheart." Mom was always so happy with my calls. "How are you? How is Andrew? How is everything?" "Everything's fine, Mom. Listen, here's the thing. My sister-in-law is having a wedding soon. In 3 weeks. "Oh, how exciting." Mom perked up. "It'll probably be a big wedding." "Yes, huge. My mother-in-law is organizing everything, the country club, inviting tons of guests." "And am I invited?" Mom suddenly asked. I froze. There it was, that very question I had feared. "Well, basically yes," I said slowly. "Victoria said you're invited. But, Mom, listen, it's so far to travel. It'll be expensive and inconvenient for you. And anyway—" "Aaron!" Mom interrupted me, and unexpectedly firm notes appeared in her voice. "What happened? What did she say to you?" I tried to brush it off, but Mom could see right through me, even over the phone. "Mom, she just—well, you know how she is about where I'm from. She said to invite you, but in such a condescending way. Like, let her come see how the city people live. And also—" "And what else?" Mom's voice became hard. "She said to make sure that you dress appropriately," I squeezed out. "That you probably don't have the right clothes for this kind of event." A long pause hung in the air. I heard Mom breathing into the phone and imagined how she was sitting in the kitchen now, gripping the phone. My mother was a proud person. She raised me alone after Dad's death. She worked 2 jobs so I could get a good education, go to college. She taught me dignity and self-respect. And now some Manhattan socialite dared to insult her. "I see," Mom finally said. "Aaron, tell me the exact date of the wedding and the venue address." "Mom, don't. I got scared." "You understand, she doesn't expect you to actually come. She was just being mean. Why do you need to go there?" "Aaron," Mom's voice sounded calm, but I knew this tone. This was how she spoke when she had made a final decision. The date and address. "Please." I gave her the information, feeling growing anxiety. What was Mom planning? She understood that my mother-in-law would create a real nightmare for her. Victoria Patterson loved to humiliate people, especially in front of witnesses. At the wedding there would be hundreds of guests, and Mom would be there alone, without support, a target for mockery. "Mom, I really don't think this is a good idea." I tried to talk her out of it. "My dear daughter," Mom suddenly softened. Don't worry, everything will be fine. Just trust me. Okay. I've been planning to visit you in New York for a long time. Now, there's a reason. But Mom. Aaron, enough. It's decided. I'm coming. Now tell me how things really are with you. How are you and Andrew? Does he protect you from this mother-in-law? We talked for another 40 minutes. I told Mom everything. About Victoria's constant put-downs, about how she reminded me of my humble origins at every opportunity, how she never missed a chance to needle me, humiliate me, show me my place. Mom listened silently, only sighing occasionally. Why didn't you tell me anything earlier? She finally asked. I didn't want to upset you. I thought I'd get used to it, that over time she would ease up. And Andrew, doesn't he see how his mother treats you? He sees. But, Mom, you know he could never stand up to her. She's controlled and manipulated him since childhood. He's a good person, really, just weak when it comes to her. A good person protects his wife, Mom said firmly. After the conversation, I went to bed with a heavy feeling. Something told me I had made a mistake by telling Mom the truth. But on the other hand, could I hide this forever? Mom wasn't a fool. She would have figured it all out sooner or later anyway. The next 3 weeks dragged on painfully slowly. Victoria was busy with wedding preparations and paid almost no attention to me, which was, honestly, a relief. She asked several times in passing whether my mother would come, clearly not expecting a positive answer. I evasively replied that she wasn't sure yet, and Victoria lost interest in the topic. Christina was running around frantically, trying on dresses, selecting accessories, changing something in the plan every day. Her fiancé, Michael, son of a real estate developer, financed all this extravagance with visible pleasure. The wedding was supposed to be the event of the season in their social circle. Mom called me every day, but didn't say a word about the wedding. She asked about my work. I taught English at a private school, about plans about the weather. I tried several times to return to the topic of her visit, but Mom skillfully steered the conversation elsewhere. A week before the wedding, another unpleasant event occurred. We gathered again at Victoria's, this time for a seating rehearsal. My mother-in-law spread out a floor plan on the huge table, and we began placing cards with names. Here will be the head table, Victoria explained, pointing to the central table. The bride and groom, Richard and I, Michael's parents, Andrew with his wife. Wait, Mom, Christina intervened. What about Grandma Eleanor? She should also be at the head table. Grandma Eleanor, of course, my mother-in-law nodded. So we need a bigger table. Andrew and his wife can sit with other guests. They're not VIPs. Andrew wanted to say something, but remained silent. I was used to such treatment and wasn't offended. I was more worried about something else. Victoria, I began cautiously, and if my mother does come after all, where will she sit? My mother-in-law raised her eyes to me with frank surprise. Your mother? So she's really planning to come. Something between amazement and irritation sounded in her voice. Well, she said she wants to come, I answered, feeling myself blush. Good Lord, I was joking. Victoria threw up her hands. Didn't she understand? Well, okay, if she really wants to see a real society wedding. She paused, then poked her finger at the farthest table in the corner of the layout. We'll seat her here. Some of Michael's distant cousins will be there. They're not particularly important guests. Mom, that's kind of, Andrew started. What kind of? Victoria cut him off. We have every seat assigned by importance. Or do you think the mother of a small-town teacher should sit on equal footing with CEOs and philanthropists? She should be grateful to even be at such an event. I remained silent. It was pointless to argue, and I didn't want to humiliate myself further. That evening I called Mom and told her about this conversation. It's all fine, Aaron, Mom answered calmly. Don't worry, I don't care where I sit. Mom, maybe you really shouldn't come? I tried one last time. You see how she treats you without even meeting you. Can you imagine what will happen when you arrive?" "I can imagine." Mom's voice had some strange note that I couldn't identify. "That's exactly why I'm going." The wedding day arrived on a clear Saturday morning. I woke up early with a heavy knot in my stomach. Mom was supposed to arrive by 3 p.m. The celebration began at 6 p.m. She had time to get to her hotel, change, and come to the country club. I offered to pick her up at the train station, but Mom categorically refused, saying she would get there perfectly fine herself. Andrew was already up, pressing his suit. He noticed my worry. "Don't stress so much," he said, coming over and hugging me. "Everything will be fine. I'll make sure Mother behaves." I only nodded, not believing his words. In 5 years together, Andrew had never been able to make Victoria behave decently toward me. Why should today be any different? By 2 p.m., we were already at the country club. The venue looked spectacular. White and gold decorations, enormous bouquets of roses and peonies, crystal chandeliers. Victoria was rushing between tables, giving final instructions to the catering staff. She was wearing an expensive champagne-colored gown covered in sequins. Her hair was styled in an elaborate updo. A massive diamond necklace sparkled on her neck. Christina was in a separate bridal suite where her hair and makeup were being done. I went in to say hello. She looked beautiful and anxious, but when she saw me, her face became guarded. "Aaron, is your mother definitely coming?" she asked bluntly. "Yes, she's already on her way," I answered. Christina grimaced. "Listen, I don't want any drama at my wedding, understand? If your mom acts weird somehow, or if my mom causes a scene—" "My mom never acts weird," I cut her off sharply. "It's your mother who loves drama." We stared at each other. Christina looked away first. "Come on, don't be upset. I'm just nervous. Today is the most important day of my life, you know." I left the room without answering. The most important day of her life. And for me, this day was turning into a nightmare. I imagined how my mother was now on a train, coming here to defend my honor, not understanding that she was walking into a lion's den. At 3:30, I received a text from Mom. "I'm in New York. We'll be there soon." My heart began beating faster. Just a couple more hours, and it would all happen. What exactly would happen, I didn't know, but my gut feeling wasn't wrong. Guests began arriving around 5:30. I stood in the country club entrance, greeting guests with Andrew. Luxury cars pulled up. Mercedes, BMWs, Teslas, and elegant ladies and gentlemen in designer clothes emerged. Victoria was in her element. She fluttered between guests, air-kissing, laughing, accepting compliments. Around 6 o'clock, I noticed Victoria approach the maitre d' and speak to him about something, pointing at the entrance. The maitre d' nodded, clearly receiving instructions. My heart sank. Had she told them not to let my mother in? At that moment, a small commotion arose at the entrance. The doorman opened it, and I saw a woman entering the lobby. For a second, I didn't even realize it was my mother. She looked so different. Usually Mom dressed simply and practically. Khakis, cardigans, comfortable flats. She never wore much makeup, preferred a natural look. But now before me stood a completely different woman. Mom was dressed in an elegant navy blue dress suit that fit her impeccably. The fabric looked expensive, a subtle silk blend that caught the light beautifully. Classic cut, no fussy details, but every line whispered quality and taste. On her feet were classic Louboutin pumps. I recognized the signature red soles. Her hair was professionally styled in soft waves. The makeup was subtle but perfectly applied, emphasizing her striking eyes. A delicate pearl necklace at her throat, a sleek designer watch on her wrist. But it wasn't just about the outfit. Mom carried herself completely differently. She walked calmly, confidently, with perfect posture and her head held high. Her gaze swept over the elegant venue without a hint of intimidation or excessive admiration. rather with the cool assessment of someone accustomed to such settings. I rushed to her. "Mom." I hugged her, breathing in her familiar perfume. Chanel, I realized with surprise. You look incredible." "Hello, sweetheart." Mom kissed my cheek. "I'm so glad to see you." She pulled back and looked at me carefully. "You've lost weight, and dark circles under your eyes. Not sleeping well." I didn't have time to answer. Andrew approached us, and I saw shock on his face. He had met my mother only a few times, and each time she was in ordinary, everyday clothes. "Hello, Mrs. Thompson," he greeted, clearly flustered. "How was your trip? Please come in." "Hello, Andrew." Mom calmly shook his hand. "Thank you." The journey was comfortable. At that moment, Victoria swooped over to us. She spotted Mom and froze for a second, clearly not expecting what she saw. Her face twisted with a mixture of surprise and irritation. Quickly composing herself, she plastered on a fake smile. "Oh, so this is your mother, Erin," she exclaimed in an artificially cheerful voice. "Finally we meet properly. I'm Victoria Patterson, Andrew's mother." She extended her hand to Mom, making no attempt to kiss cheeks as she did with all other guests. "Sarah Thompson." Mom introduced herself, shaking the offered hand. Her handshake was firm and brief. "Thank you for the invitation." "Oh, of course, of course." Victoria looked Mom over with an appraising glance from head to toe. I knew she was looking for something to criticize, but judging by her face, it wasn't easy to find. "We're so glad you could make it. After all, Watertown is quite a distance. It must have been quite a journey." "Not too difficult," Mom answered calmly. "I'm used to traveling." "Oh, really?" Victoria feigned interest. "Do you travel often?" "Business requires it," Mom answered briefly. "Business?" My mother-in-law laughed. "Erin said you're a teacher. Do teachers really travel that much? I thought you were in your classroom most of the time." "I'm no longer teaching," Mom said calmly. "I changed careers several years ago." "Did you?" Victoria was clearly waiting for details, but Mom didn't elaborate. An awkward pause hung in the air. "Mom, let's go." "I'll show you where you'll be sitting," I said quickly, taking Mom's arm. We moved into the ballroom. I felt Victoria's eyes boring into our backs. I knew she was irritated. Her plan to humiliate my mother had spectacularly backfired right at the entrance. Mom looked every bit as polished, if not more so, than the other guests. "Mom, what happened?" I whispered when we moved away. "You're completely different. And this outfit, it's designer, isn't it? Where did you get it? And your hair?" "Erin, calm down." Mom stopped and took my hands. "Everything's fine. I just decided it was time to present myself properly. Don't I have the right to look nice?" "You do, of course. It's just, I've never seen you like this." "I haven't seen myself like this in a while either," Mom smiled. "You know, sometimes it's important to remind yourself who you really are." I wanted to ask what she meant, but we were interrupted by a coordinator who invited all guests to take their seats. I led Mom to her table in the far corner. Several people were already sitting there, an elderly couple and a middle-aged man with his wife. All of them were clearly not from the A-list. Mom sat down gracefully and greeted her table mates. I saw them looking at her curiously, clearly wondering who she was. The luxurious setting, the designer clothes on most guests. Against this background, Mom, in her understated elegance, looked refined but not flashy. "Are you sure everything will be okay?" I asked quietly, leaning toward her. "Absolutely." Mom looked at me with such confidence that I almost believed her. "Go, dear, you need to be at the head table. Don't worry about me." I reluctantly returned to the main table where Andrew, his parents, and Michael's parents were already sitting. Christina and Michael were supposed to make their entrance in a few minutes according to the program. Victoria sat across from me and kept glancing toward Mom's table. I saw her whisper something to her husband, Richard, nodding in that direction. He shrugged indifferently. He wasn't very interested in social politics. Finally, music played, and the bride and groom entered. Everyone applauded. Christina was stunning in her Vera Wang gown. Michael looked handsome in his custom tuxedo. They walked to the head table under enthusiastic exclamations. The ceremony began. The wedding planner, a well-known figure in New York society circles, made eloquent speeches, told jokes, entertained the crowd. The couple was showered with gifts. I sat, smiled, and tried not to think about what would happen next. After the first toast and congratulations, servers began bringing out courses. Victoria got up to circulate among the guests. I knew that sooner or later she would reach Mom's table, and I waited for that moment with dread. And there it was, Victoria, smiling and greeting people left and right, finally approached the corner table. I saw her stop next to Mom. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but from her gestures and expressions it was clear she was playing the gracious hostess while delivering barbs. Mom sat calmly, occasionally nodding. Her face remained composed. Victoria was clearly expecting some reaction, but not getting one. She moved on with obvious frustration. Another hour passed. The planner ran several games and activities. Guests loosened up. The atmosphere became more relaxed. I relaxed a bit. It seemed the worst was over. Mom sat at her table, calmly chatting with neighbors, occasionally smiling. Everything was going relatively smoothly, but I relaxed too soon. After the couple's first dance, the planner announced, "And now the mother of the bride, Victoria Patterson, would like to say a few words." Victoria stood up and took the microphone. She was flushed from champagne. Her eyes sparkled with something dangerous. I tensed, knowing that in this state she was especially unpredictable. "Dear friends," Victoria began, "today is such a special day. My darling Christina is marrying this wonderful young man, Michael. I'm so thrilled to share this joy with all of you, our friends, business associates, loved ones." Guests applauded. Victoria paused, savoring the attention. "You know," she continued, "I've always believed that a wedding isn't just the union of two people. It's the union of two families, two social circles, two—" She paused deliberately. "Worlds, if you will. And how important it is that these families match, understand each other, come from the same background." She looked meaningfully toward the head table where Michael's parents sat, old money New Yorkers, board members of major corporations. "I'm so grateful that Christina found not just someone she loves, but a family that's our equal." Victoria paused again. "Unlike some people who marry, well, shall we say, outside their class." I felt the blood drain from my face. Was she really going to do this? Andrew tensed beside me, his hand gripping mine under the table. "Take my younger son, Andrew, for example." Victoria casually gestured toward us. "He married a girl from, how shall I put this delicately, a very small town upstate." She said small town as if it were a disease. "Sweet girl, of course, but breeding will tell, you know. You can't escape your origins." The room went quiet. Guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. Christina had gone pale. Michael looked angry. Andrew started to stand up, but I held him back. "Mom, stop it," he said loudly. "Stop what?" Victoria turned to him, her eyes glittering. "I'm just being honest. And you know, we even have that girl's mother here tonight." She pointed toward Mom's table. She came all the way from, what was it called? Watertown? To see how real society people celebrate. All heads turned toward Mom. I saw some guests smirk. Mom sat calmly, her expression unchanged. Only her hands clasped slightly tighter in her lap. And you know what's really funny? Victoria was clearly on a roll now. When I invited her, I was completely joking. I even said, "Make sure you dress appropriately," thinking of course she wouldn't actually come. But she did. She laughed. "I suppose when you're from a place like that, an event like this is the social highlight of the decade." Laughter rippled through parts of the room. I sat frozen, tears burning behind my eyes. It was so cruel, so humiliating. Not just for Mom, for me too. In front of all these people, all these guests, Victoria was publicly destroying us. Victoria Patterson, Andrew said loudly, standing up. Apologize. Right now. Apologize. Victoria looked at him with feigned surprise. For what? For telling the truth. At that moment, my mother stood up. She rose slowly with complete dignity. Her face was calm, but I saw steel in her eyes. She took several steps forward toward the center of the ballroom. Everyone was watching her. Excuse me, Mom said quietly but clearly. Her voice carried throughout the room without amplification. I'd like to respond. Victoria raised her eyebrows, clearly not expecting this small-town woman to dare speak up. Oh, certainly, Victoria said with a condescending smile. Please, the floor is yours. Though you might want the microphone. I imagine you're not used to speaking in front of large groups. I don't need a microphone, Mom said. And yes, I am from Watertown. I did work as a public school teacher, and I did come here at your invitation, however backhanded it was. She paused. The ballroom was absolutely silent. Everyone waited. But there's something you don't know, Victoria, Mom continued. Something I think it's time to share. Mom stood in the center of the ballroom. I couldn't take my eyes off her. Her posture was perfect, her voice steady and calm. She didn't look frightened or embarrassed. On the contrary, there was an inner strength radiating from her that I'd never noticed before. You're right, I'm from a small town, Mom continued, and I'm not ashamed of that. But, Victoria, let me clarify a few things. Victoria crossed her arms, watching Mom with poorly concealed irritation. The guests sat transfixed. 10 years ago, after my husband died, I really was teaching high school math. Mom spoke calmly. Making $45,000 a year, raising my daughter alone. Yes, it was tough, but I never felt inferior to anyone because of it. Very touching, Victoria said sarcastically. But what's the point of this confession? The point, Mom smiled slightly, is that 7 years ago my life changed. You see, I had an idea. Simple, maybe even unremarkable to some, but I believed in it. Mom walked a few steps across the floor, and all eyes followed her. In Watertown, there was an abandoned textile mill, a factory that had closed in the 90s when manufacturing left the region. Huge facility, equipment rusting away. The town had no idea what to do with it, and I thought, why not revive it? The sustainable fashion movement was growing. People wanted American-made, eco-friendly textiles. The infrastructure was there. It just needed vision, modern technology, proper marketing. I listened with my mouth open. What was she talking about? What factory? She'd never mentioned anything like this. I took out a loan, Mom continued. Found investors, which wasn't easy. A middle-aged widow from upstate New York with no business experience? But I made them believe. And I was right. Victoria's face had lost its smug expression. She looked uncertain now. Today, Mom said this calmly, almost casually, my company, American Heritage Textiles, produces organic cotton and sustainable fabrics not just for the U.S. market, but exports to 23 countries worldwide. We have 3 manufacturing facilities, a corporate office in Manhattan, on Fifth Avenue, actually, and employ over 500 people. Last year, we received a federal sustainability grant. This year, I was nominated for the National Businesswoman of the Year Award in Manufacturing. Stunned silence filled the ballroom. I stared at Mom, unable to believe what I was hearing. Was this true? All of it? That's impossible, Victoria breathed. Quite possible, Mom said, pulling out her phone. If you'd like, I can show you. Here's our company website. Here's the Forbes profile. Here's the Incorporated magazine feature. And here's a photo from the White House Sustainable Business Initiative where I'm standing with the Commerce Secretary. She held out her phone. Several nearby guests leaned in to look. I watched their faces change, surprise morphing into respect and admiration. But why didn't you say anything? Victoria asked, clearly shaken. Why didn't Aaron mention this? Mom looked at me with sadness in her eyes. Because my daughter didn't know. I never told her. I didn't want her to feel pressured by my success or think she had to use my position. I wanted her to build her own life, her own identity, not live in my shadow. Mom paused. And honestly, I was proud of that choice. Erin is independent, educated, accomplished. She's an excellent teacher, respected by her students and colleagues. She didn't need my money or connections to be valuable. Tears streamed down my face. I stood and walked to Mom, embracing her tightly. I felt her arms wrap around me. Why didn't you tell me? I whispered. Because I wanted you to be proud of yourself, not just proud to be my daughter, Mom said quietly. I'm sorry, sweetheart. We stood in the center of the ballroom, holding each other, as silence gave way to applause. At first scattered, then building. Guests rose to their feet, clapping. Someone called out, "Here, here." Victoria stood frozen, her face ashen. She sank into her chair, unable to speak. One of the guests, a distinguished man in his 60s, rose and approached us. I recognized him as James Whitmore, Richard's senior business partner, one of the most influential figures in New York finance. "Sarah Thompson," he exclaimed warmly. "I can't believe it. We met at the Economic Club luncheon last year. Your presentation on ethical supply chains was remarkable." Mom turned to him and smiled. "James, of course. Good to see you again. Why on earth didn't you mention you'd be here?" James clapped Mom on the shoulder in a friendly way. "Richard," he called to my father-in-law, who sat looking completely bewildered. "Do you realize who this is? Sarah Thompson runs one of the most innovative companies in American manufacturing. She's been featured in the Wall Street Journal, Harvard Business Review." Richard slowly stood, looking at Mom with new eyes. Then he glanced at his wife, who sat slumped in her chair. "Victoria," he said quietly, but everyone heard. "What have you done?" Other guests began approaching us. It turned out many knew of Mom or her company. One woman, who owned a chain of boutique hotels, gushed about using Mom's linens exclusively. A man who ran a major retail group asked about expanding their partnership. Mom was surrounded by people, answering questions, smiling. But every so often she glanced at me, checking to make sure I was okay. I stood next to Andrew, who held my hand tightly. "Aaron," he said quietly, "I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I never protected you. I'm sorry I let my mother treat you this way. I was a coward." I looked at him. His face was serious, his eyes filled with genuine remorse. "I don't know if you can forgive me," he continued, "but I swear this will never happen again. Never. If Mother doesn't change how she treats you, we're moving out. I already looked at apartments yesterday. We'll get our own place, and I won't allow her to hurt you anymore." "Andrew," I began. "No, let me finish." He took both my hands. "I love you. I've always loved you. And I married you because you're smart and kind and amazing. Not because of where you're from. You're my family, and I should have protected you. I was obligated to, but I was too weak to stand up to my mother. I'm ashamed." I hugged him, and we stood like that while life swirled around us. The wedding planner, flustered by the dramatic turn, tried to restore normalcy. Music resumed. Guests were directed back to dinner, but the atmosphere had completely shifted. Everyone was buzzing about what had happened, sneaking glances at Mom, at me, at Victoria. Victoria sat at the head table, untouched food before her. She stared into space, and for the first time I saw her looking broken. Richard sat beside her, clearly furious. He was speaking to her in low, harsh tones, and she just shook her head. Christina and Michael looked mortified. Their celebration had been hijacked by this drama, and they clearly didn't know what to do. Christina tried to approach me several times, but I pretended not to notice. Mom was moved to a different table, now near the center, among the VIP guests. James Whitmore stayed by her side, deep in conversation. Other business leaders joined them. Mom handled it all naturally, laughing, answering questions. She was completely at ease. About an hour later, Victoria approached Andrew and me. She looked like she'd aged 10 years. Her makeup was smudged, her hands trembling. "Aaron," she began hoarsely, "I need to speak with you. And your mother." I looked at her silently, not wanting to engage. But Andrew nodded. "Let's step outside," he suggested. We went to a private terrace. Mom joined us, excusing herself from the other guests. The four of us stood there, me, Andrew, Mom, and Victoria. Victoria was silent for a long time, staring at the ground. Then she raised her eyes to Mom. "I didn't know," she said quietly. "I truly didn't know who you were." "Would it have mattered?" Mom asked calmly. "If I'd stayed a teacher, would that justify how you treated me? How you treated my daughter?" Victoria flinched. "No, I didn't mean to hurt you." "You didn't mean to?" Mom's voice remained steady. "You belittled me, made assumptions about my life. You treated my daughter like she was beneath you for 5 years, humiliating her, mocking where she came from. And tonight you tried to publicly shame us both." "Mom, I'm so ashamed," Andrew interjected, "for everything she's done to Aaron. For tonight, for every cruel word. Please forgive us." Mom looked at him for a long moment. "Andrew, you seem like a good person," she finally said, "but you've been weak. You've let your mother torment your wife for 5 years. That's inexcusable." Andrew went pale but nodded. "I know. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I promise I'll change. I'll prove to Aaron that I'm worthy of her." "Do that," Mom said simply. Then she turned to Victoria. "As for you, you can consider that I accepted your invitation. I came. I saw how society people celebrate. And you know what I didn't like? Too much pretension, too little substance. Too much pride, too little humanity." She took my hand. "Aaron, let's go. I'm tired. Let's leave." I nodded, grateful. We moved toward the exit. Andrew followed us. "Aaron, wait," he caught up. "I'm coming with you. I need to talk to you." "Andrew, stay," I said wearily. "It's your sister's wedding. You should be here. We'll talk tomorrow." "Tomorrow," I said firmly. He looked at me, then at Mom, nodded, and stepped back. We went outside. The evening was warm, stars visible despite the city lights. Mom stopped and took a deep breath. "Well," she said, "that's over." "Mom," I hugged her. "Why didn't you tell me all these years? I thought you were still teaching, barely making ends meet." "Because I was afraid, sweetheart." Mom stroked my hair. "Afraid you'd think my success meant you'd failed somehow. Afraid you'd feel obligated to me. I wanted you to be proud of your own life, your own accomplishments, not defined by mine." "Did you know I was unhappy?" I asked. "I suspected," Mom sighed. "From your voice on our calls, from what you didn't say. But I was waiting for you to tell me when you were ready. When you called about that invitation, I knew it was time to act." We took a car service back to her hotel. On the way, Mom told me everything. How she'd started the business, the struggles of those early years, working 2 jobs while developing business plans late at night, finding investors, the factory slowly coming back to life, that first big contract, the company's growth. "The first 3 years, I barely slept," Mom said, juggling teaching with running the startup. Then when things stabilized, I quit teaching and went all in on the business. That was 4 years ago. "And I had no idea," I shook my head. "I'd visit on weekends, and you always seemed the same." "I tried to keep it normal," Mom smiled. "I'd work after you went to bed. I wanted our time together to be about us, not about business." We arrived at her hotel, the St. Regis, I noticed with surprise. We went up to her suite. It was beautiful. "Is this how you always live now?" I asked. "Usually simpler," Mom laughed. "But today I wanted to make an impression. Just in case." We sat on the sofa, and I leaned my head on her shoulder like when I was little. "What happens now?" I asked quietly. "What do you want to happen?" "I don't know. I love Andrew, but I'm so tired of his family, of the constant stress, of having to endure humiliation." "You should never endure humiliation from anyone," Mom said firmly. "Under any circumstances. If Andrew loves you, he needs to understand that and create a life where you feel valued. If he can't do that, then maybe this isn't the right relationship." I was silent, knowing deep down she was right. "Give him one chance," Mom said, reading my thoughts. "If he changes, if he truly starts protecting you, then maybe he deserves you. If not, then you'll know what to do." The next morning, Andrew showed up early. He brought flowers for both Mom and me. He looked exhausted, eyes red from lack of sleep. "I didn't sleep," he said as we sat in the hotel cafe. "I was thinking about us, about these past 5 years, and I realized what a fool I've been." He paused, choosing words carefully. "Aaron, I want us to start fresh. I've already put down first and last on an apartment, a nice 1-bedroom in Brooklyn. We can move in this week, if you're willing. I told my mother that if she disrespects you even once more, I'm cutting off contact completely." "What did she say?" I asked. "She's still in shock, but Dad laid into her too. Hard. He's furious about the scene at the wedding. Says James Whitmore now thinks our family is classless." Mom listened quietly. "Andrew," she finally said, "I can see you're sincere. I appreciate that. But understand this. If you ever let anyone hurt my daughter again, if you turn away when she needs support, I will make sure you break up. I have the resources to provide Erin with everything she needs, job, apartment, whatever. She won't depend on you or your family. Clear?" Andrew nodded solemnly. "Crystal clear. I promise this won't happen again." We did move the following week. The apartment was small but ours, free from Victoria's shadow. For the first time in 5 years I could breathe. Victoria tried calling several times, but Andrew was firm. He said he'd only speak with her after she apologized to me properly. She resisted at first, but eventually gave in. We met at a neutral cafe in Midtown. Victoria looked diminished somehow. She sat across from me, silent for a long time, then spoke. "Aaron, I'm sorry. I was wrong, terribly wrong. I treated you horribly, and I'm ashamed. I'm not asking you to forget everything, but I'm asking for a chance to do better." The words didn't come easily for her. I could see that, but they sounded genuine. "All right," I said. "One chance." Mom and I started talking every day. She told me about the business, invited me to visit the factory. I promised I would. For the first time in years, I felt I had solid ground under my feet, someone who'd always have my back. And Victoria, she really did change. Slowly, gradually, she started treating me with respect. Maybe because she learned who my mother was. Maybe because she finally saw me as a person, not as the girl from nowhere. Either way, life got easier. The story had a coda the following year. Mom won the National Businesswoman of the Year award. The ceremony was at the Waldorf Astoria, and we were all there. Victoria came too, at Mom's invitation. She sat in the audience and applauded when Mom accepted her award. Afterward, she approached her. "Sarah, I admire you. What you've built, how you raised your daughter, it's remarkable." Mom smiled. "Thank you, Victoria. Erin turned out pretty well, didn't she? Despite everything." They looked at each other, and something passed between them. Maybe not friendship, but a beginning of mutual respect. I stood nearby, holding Andrew's hand, and felt truly happy for the first time in years. I'd learned something important. Dignity isn't given to you by others. It's what you maintain within yourself, no matter what. And my mother had taught me that better than any words could. She'd shown me that it doesn't matter where you're from. What matters is who you are. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this.